Nobody knows. Not the satellites, not the radar systems, not even the most advanced intelligence networks on the planet, where the next missile is coming from. Because Iran isn't launching from the surface anymore, they're launching from underground. No launch pad, no heat signature, no warning. By the time the system detects it, it's already in the air. And right now, as you're watching this, Israel has been given a window that is closing fast. What happens when that window shuts changes everything. Welcome to Currency Archive. Now, before we go any further, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. You know that relative of yours, the one who's been around long enough to remember when the news actually told you the truth? That uncle, that grandfather, that wise old neighbor who always said, "Beta, something big is coming," and was always right? Be that person for someone today. Hit that subscribe button. Not for us, but so that they find us too. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from right now? Because what's happening today affects every single one of you differently. Let's talk about it. Something has changed in this war, and most people have not noticed it yet. For decades, military planners, intelligence agencies, and satellite systems around the world operated on one basic assumption: that a missile launch could be detected before it happened. Radar would pick up the heat. Satellites would spot the preparation. Analysts would see the trucks, the fuel lines, the launch crews moving into position. There would be a window, a warning, a moment to respond. That assumption is now dead. Iran has quietly crossed a threshold that military strategists have long feared. They are no longer launching missiles from open desert pads or visible surface installations. They have moved their operations underground. Deep inside mountain tunnels and hardened facilities, Iran has built a launch network that does not require traditional pads, does not produce the heat signatures that satellites track, and does not give radar systems the early warning they depend on. This is not a minor tactical upgrade. This is a fundamental shift in how this war is being fought. The consequences of that shift are only beginning to be understood. When Iran launches from underground, the entire early warning timeline collapses. Military planners who once had 20, 30, or 40 minutes to respond now face a window that has shrunk to 4 hours or less for full assessment and strategic decision-making. That 4-hour window is not just a military problem. It is an economic problem. It is a market problem. It is a decision-making problem for every government, every central bank, and every major investor watching this conflict unfold in real time. Think about what 4 hours means. In 4 hours, a government must assess the threat, verify the intelligence, consult its allies, prepare its defenses, and decide whether to respond and how. In 4 hours, energy traders are already moving. Currency desks are already repositioning. Shipping companies are already rerouting. The market does not wait for confirmation. The market moves on fear, and right now, fear has a 4-hour clock attached to it. Israel has been absorbing wave after wave of these attacks. The campaign Tehran is running is not random. It is not emotional. It is structured, deliberate, and, by all observable indicators, designed for a long war. Iran is not trying to win this conflict in a single dramatic strike. They are trying to exhaust Israel's defense systems, drain its missile interceptor stockpiles, and force the Israeli economy into a sustained state of emergency that becomes impossible to maintain over time. This is a strategy of attrition dressed in the language of military escalation. Every interceptor Israel fires costs money. Every scrambled fighter jet burns fuel and flight hours. Every emergency cabinet meeting pulls decision-makers away from governance. Every alert siren that sounds in a major Israeli city slows commerce, disrupts supply chains, and sends another wave of anxiety through a population that has been living under this pressure for months. Iran understands this math, and they are using it. The broader business community has not yet fully processed what underground launch capability actually means for regional stability. It means that the conflict cannot be resolved by targeting visible infrastructure. It means that air superiority, which Israel holds, does not translate into the kind of decisive advantage it once did. It means that this war has no visible center of gravity left to strike. When your enemy has no surface to attack, you're no longer fighting a conventional conflict. You are fighting an idea, a network, and a doctrine, and those things are extraordinarily difficult and expensive to defeat. The young entrepreneurs and business strategists watching this situation need to understand one thing clearly. This is not a regional border dispute. This is not a political disagreement that diplomats will resolve over the next few weeks. What is unfolding right now is a deliberate, methodical campaign by a nation-state that has spent years preparing for exactly this moment. Iran planned for this. They built for this. And now the world is watching to see whether the systems designed to stop them were ever built to handle what is coming next. There is a building in the Negev desert that almost nobody talks about openly. It has no official public address. It does not appear on commercial maps. Foreign journalists are not permitted within its perimeter. And yet, every serious military strategist, every senior intelligence analyst, and every government with a functioning foreign policy department knows exactly what it is. and exactly what it means. It is the Dimona nuclear reactor. And for the first time in modern history, it is being named, openly, directly, and deliberately, as a target. Iran has issued a warning that should have stopped the world in its tracks. If efforts aimed at regime change continue, Tehran has signaled it is prepared to strike Israel's Dimona facility. Not imply, not suggest. Signal? With the kind of cold, calculated language that professional diplomats use precisely because they want the message understood without any room for misinterpretation. This is not rhetoric. This is a strategic communication. To understand why this moment is different from every previous escalation in this conflict, one must understand what Dimona represents. It is not simply a nuclear research facility. It is the physical embodiment of Israel's nuclear deterrence posture. A posture that has kept a certain balance of terror in place across the Middle East for more than 5 decades. Israel has never officially confirmed its nuclear capabilities, but the world has always known they exist, and that knowledge, that quiet, unspoken understanding, has been one of the primary reasons this region has not collapsed into total war before now. By naming Dimona as a target, Iran is doing something extraordinarily dangerous. They are not just threatening a building. They are threatening the architecture of deterrence itself. If that architecture cracks, even slightly, the calculations that every government in this region makes every single day begin to change. Saudi Arabia changes its calculations. Turkey changes its calculations. Egypt changes its calculations. And the investors, the energy companies, the shipping conglomerates, and the multinational corporations that have built their regional strategies around a certain baseline of stability, they change their calculations too. Markets do not wait for missiles to land. They price in the possibility long before the event. But the nuclear dimension of this conflict is only one layer of what is now unfolding. On the ground, something equally significant is happening. Reports have emerged suggesting that Iraqi Kurdish forces have launched operations inside Iranian territory. If confirmed, this represents a dramatic expansion of the battlefield, one that pulls a new set of actors into direct confrontation with Tehran. Iran does not tolerate incursions into its territory lightly. Every historical precedent suggests a response that is disproportionate by design, intended to send a message not just to the Kurdish forces involved, but to every regional player watching from the sidelines. The message is simple. The borders of this conflict are no longer fixed. And then there is Russia. Moscow has reportedly lost contact with Tehran's nuclear leadership. That sentence deserves to be read slowly because its implications are profound. Russia, a nation that has maintained deep strategic ties with Iran, that has supplied weapons, provided diplomatic cover, and positioned itself as a key partner in Tehran's long-term security architecture, has lost contact with the people responsible for Iran's nuclear program. What does that silence mean? It could mean confusion inside Iran's command structure. It could mean a deliberate communications blackout designed to prevent outside interference at a critical moment. Or it could mean something far more serious, a disruption at the highest levels of Iran's nuclear decision-making that nobody outside Tehran fully understands yet. What is clear is this: Russia is not waiting to find out. Moscow is already moving to secure Iranian nuclear facilities. Not to help Iran, not out of alliance loyalty. Russia is moving to protect its own strategic interests in a situation that is rapidly moving beyond anyone's ability to fully control. When Russia starts physically securing nuclear sites in the middle of an active conflict, the world has entered a category of risk that has no modern precedent. The entrepreneurs and business strategists who are tracking this conflict must understand what this moment represents. This is no longer about missiles and interception systems. This is about who controls the most dangerous materials on Earth, when the people who were supposed to control them can no longer be reached. Wars are not won only on battlefields. Sometimes they are won in boardrooms, in pipeline control rooms, in the quiet offices of energy ministers who pick up a phone, make one call, and change the price of everything overnight. What happened in Qatar this week was not a military event, but its consequences will be felt far more deeply and far more permanently than any missile strike recorded in this conflict so far. Qatar declared a state of emergency and halted gas production. Read that again, slowly. Qatar, the single largest exporter of liquefied natural gas on the planet, the country that heats European homes in winter, powers Asian manufacturing floors around the clock, and sits at the center of a global energy supply chain that moves trillions of dollars annually. That country just stopped production, not slowed it, not reduced it, stopped it. The ripple effect of that single decision touches every continent on Earth. European energy ministers who spent the last 2 years rebuilding their LNG reserves after the Russian supply crisis are now staring at a second supply shock they did not see coming and are not prepared to absorb. Asian manufacturing hubs that depend on steady gas imports to keep production lines running are already calculating how many days of reserve supply they have left before output begins to slow. Shipping companies that move LNG across the world's oceans are repricing contracts in real time, because when the supply disappears, the cost of moving what little remains skyrockets immediately. This is what an energy weapon looks like when it is deployed. And Qatar did not act alone. Almost simultaneously, with a timing that serious analysts are not willing to call coincidental, Russian President Vladimir Putin issued a direct threat to cut gas supplies to Europe. This is a man who has used energy as a geopolitical instrument before. He has done it openly, deliberately, and without apology. When Putin makes this kind of statement in the middle of a Middle Eastern conflict, he is not commenting on events. He is participating in them. What Russia and Qatar have done, whether coordinated or simply aligned by shared strategic interest, is compress the energy options available to the Western alliance at precisely the moment when that alliance needs maximum economic flexibility to sustain its military and political commitments. Less energy means higher costs. Higher costs mean slower economies. Slower economies mean less political appetite for prolonged military engagement. Less political appetite means pressure on governments to negotiate, to compromise, to step back from commitments they made when the situation looked more manageable. This is not an accident. This is a strategy, and it is working. Spain's rejection of White House claims about military cooperation adds another dimension to this fracture. When a NATO member publicly distances itself from the United States narrative during an active conflict, it is not simply a diplomatic disagreement. It is a signal to every other alliance partner watching that the cost of full alignment with Washington is beginning to outweigh the benefits. Alliance structures do not collapse dramatically. They erode quietly, one public disagreement at a time, one rejected claim at a time, one energy crisis at a time. The young business strategists observing the situation must understand something that traditional news coverage consistently fails to explain. Energy is not simply a commodity. Energy is the foundational input of every other economic activity on Earth. When energy becomes uncertain, everything built on top of it becomes uncertain too. Supply chains that companies spent decades optimizing for cost and efficiency were built on one silent assumption: that energy would always be available, predictable, and reasonably priced. That assumption is being dismantled in real time. The businesses that survive what is coming are not necessarily the strongest or the most innovative. They are the ones that recognized earliest that the rules had changed, that the old models of supply chain planning, energy budgeting, and geopolitical risk assessment were written for a world that no longer exists. Qatar just reminded every boardroom on Earth of something brutally simple. When a small peninsula in the Persian Gulf stops exporting gas, the lights in cities 10,000 kilometers away begin to flicker. There's a moment in every major conflict when the most powerful player in the room stops looking powerful. It does not happen with a single dramatic defeat. It does not happen when a missile lands or a warship sinks. It happens quietly, in a vote, in a budget disagreement, in a public statement that reveals to anyone paying close attention that the machine is no longer moving in one direction. That moment arrived in Washington this week. The United States Congress voted to block the president from authorizing new strikes in this conflict, not to slow them down, not to demand a review, to block them completely, despite a formal request from the executive branch for $50 billion to sustain and expand military operations in the region. $50 billion. That number alone deserves examination, because buried inside that request is a figure that tells a more honest story about what this conflict has actually cost. Nearly $2 billion in military equipment has already been lost or expended in this campaign. Interceptor missiles fired, aircraft damaged, naval assets compromised, operational infrastructure degraded, $2 billion gone in a conflict that the public was never fully briefed on, in operations that were never fully explained under an offensive that military planners internally named Big Wave. And Big Wave, it turns out, has problems that go far beyond budget overruns. The operational failures emerging from this campaign are the kind that military historians study for decades, not because they are rare, but because they reveal something fundamental about what happens when the pressure of conflict overwhelms the systems designed to manage it. Strike teams operating under Big Wave reportedly hit targets that turned out to be aircraft drawings, technical illustrations of F-14 fighter jets, mistaken in the fog of operational urgency for real aircraft on the ground. Real munitions, real costs, real consequences, deployed against drawings. This is not simply a tactical embarrassment. It is a window into the broader confusion surrounding this offensive. Confusion that exists not at the level of individual soldiers making difficult decisions under fire, but at the level of intelligence assessment, target verification, and command clarity. When the systems designed to prevent these mistakes begin failing, it means the entire operational architecture is under strain that it was not designed to sustain. And the human cost continues to mount. An Iranian warship has reportedly sunk with 150 people missing. Every life lost in this conflict, on every side, represents a cost that balance sheets cannot capture and that no post-war analysis will ever fully account for. But beyond the human tragedy, the sinking of a warship in an already volatile maritime environment adds another layer of unpredictability to a region where the Strait of Hormuz the narrow passage through which nearly 20% of the world's oil supply moves, remains dangerously exposed. Back in Washington, the political fracture runs deeper than a single congressional vote. Public trust is eroding. Government transparency is being questioned. The political controversies surrounding this administration's handling of the conflict have created an environment where the executive branch is simultaneously trying to manage an overseas military campaign and a domestic credibility crisis. These two pressures do not exist in separate compartments. They feed each other. Every unanswered question at home weakens the political authority needed to make decisive decisions abroad. For the global business community, the implications of American strategic paralysis are profound and immediate. The United States dollar, the United States military presence, and the United States political leadership have functioned, for decades, as the invisible infrastructure beneath the global economic system. Trade agreements, shipping lane security, energy pricing, and international investment flows all operate within a framework that assumes American strategic coherence at its foundation. When that coherence begins to fracture, even temporarily, the entire framework becomes less reliable. Investors feel it before they can explain it. Supply chain managers sense it before the data confirms it. Entrepreneurs building businesses that depend on stable international conditions suddenly find that the ground beneath their long-term plans is shifting in ways their models never anticipated. This conflict is not simply a military event unfolding in the Middle East. It is a stress test for alliances, for energy systems, for military capabilities, and for the political will of the most powerful nation on Earth. And right now, every single one of those systems is showing cracks. The question is no longer whether the fracture is real. The question is how deep it goes, and whether anyone in a position of power is still willing to look.